Good morning.
We will call to order the March 21st, 2022 meeting of the Georgia Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission meeting. The agenda has been circulated. Commissioners or members of our staff, are there any additions, changes, or revisions to the agenda as has been circulated? This one? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it looks like position C in the preliminary hearing will be continued. And that's in order to retrieve some bank records from a defunct bank that should be able to resolve that case. And Mr. Cusack, are we gonna be waiving E and F?
Yes, I believe so. And Mr. Brown is here. In both of those cases.
Mr. Cusack, why don't you go ahead and go to the podium so we can make sure we have it.
And Mr. Chair, this is positions E and F. It is in the matter of Antonio Brown. It was a Atlanta City Council account and then his mayoral account as well. So it deals with the lack of filing, but what we're going to do is consent to the probable cause on both of those cases and then keep those open. Mr. Brown's brought some documents to turn over to me that I can actually sort of figure out everything that's going on with the case and try to settle this matter within that window we have after probable cause has been found.
So Mr. Cusack or Mr. Amati, are we going to continue the hearing or what are we going to do?
I think the cleaner approach is that the respondent will waive probable cause and opens a 30-day negotiation window that we can resolve it and not have it hanging out there.
Great, so we'll just remove those from the agenda?
Correct.
Yes.
Mr. Brown, did you want to comment at all before we change the agenda?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to this body. My grandma passed away, and I've been back and forth between here and Houston. So I just appreciate Mr. Cusack giving me this opportunity, and I take full responsibility and accountability for the reports not being filed, and I'm willing to accept any repercussions that may have caused. So thank you to this body.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for appearing, and our condolences on the loss of your grandmother.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure. Okay, so any other changes or edits or additions to the agenda from either the commissioners or our staff? Hearing none, matter 21-0011-C in the matter of Kasim Reed is continued. Matters 22-003-C and 22-0004-C are hereby removed from the agenda. With those edits and changes, I move that we accept the commission meeting agenda for Monday, March 21, 2022 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the meeting agenda as amended, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries and the meeting agenda is accepted as amended. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, review and approval of minutes for the regular meetings from December 9, 2021 and the special meeting from January 24, 2022. The minutes have been circulated as part of the commission packet. Are there any questions regarding the minutes? Are there any edits, amendments, or additions to the minutes? Let's start first with the December 9th, 2021 meeting. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from December 9th, 2021.
Move to approve. Second.
The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion carries by a vote of 3-0 to approve the minutes from the 12/9/2021 meeting. Again, we'll consider the minutes from the special meeting of January 24th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
The motion has been properly made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries 3-0, and the minutes from the special meeting of January 24, 2022 are hereby approved. We will move on to the preliminary hearings on the agenda as amended, in the matter of Hardy Davis Jr., matter number 21-0020-C. We'll call that matter Mr. Cusack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are sharing our screen with those on Zoom.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, this is Ed Tarver on behalf of Hardy Davis. In this matter, 21-0020-C, respondent consents to probable cause in this matter.
Great, thank you, Mr. Tarver. Mr. Cusack, I guess that makes your presentation pretty short then, doesn't it?
That works.
Okay, so Mr. Tarver, you're consenting to probable cause. Suggests to me that we probably don't need to have a finding of probable cause. And so for the reasons, or similar to the matters for Mr. Brown, we will remove those from the agenda, and Mr. Cusack will get an appropriate order, I assume, or at some point.
Mr. Chair, we are not consenting to probable cause in 2018-0051.
That will be the next case.
Understood. It was just 0020. Is that right, Mr. Tarver?
That's correct.
Okay, understood. Hold on, Mr. Tarver.
I don't believe it's we need to have a motion or just the consent. All right.
The question was whether or not just procedurally we needed a motion, but I don't think we need a motion or a vote by the commission since we've got a consent from the parties. And so in light of that consent, we will move on to the next item in our preliminary hearings in the matter of concerned citizens of Richmond County and Hardy Davis Jr. and Tanya Roberts and James McKinnon, matter number 2018-0051. Mr. Cusack, you are also handling this matter. Mr. Tarver, will you be arguing this matter on behalf of the respondents?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Tarver, why don't you go ahead and hold tight for a second. Mr. Cusack's going to present the case on behalf of the commission, and then we'll come back to you for any comments. And Mr. Tarver, if you have any questions, we ask you to just hold those until Mr. Cusack presents his case, and then we'll come to you. Go ahead, Mr. Cusack.
Commissioners, this is case 2018-0051. This is in the matter of concerned citizens of Richmond County, James McKinnon, Hardy Davis Jr., and Tanya Gibbons. I'm going to give some background on this case. It had a bit of a strange beginning, in that this was a third-party complaint that was filed by Mr. David Barty on May 22nd of 2018. The complaint stated that there were two billboards that went up in the Augusta area, which stated vote for the new James Brown Arena at Regency Mall. One of these said paid for by concerned citizens of Richmond County. And I have pictures of these both, and I'll show them to you in a minute. What was interesting about this complaint is that concerned citizens of Richmond County was never registered with any entity in the state. It wasn't registered with the local filing office, wasn't registered with the Campaign Finance Commission with us, nor the Secretary of State. So there's no registration for it anywhere. It's purely a fictional entity that was created for this purpose. So in that sense, the complaint came in as against concerned citizens of Richmond County, and we have no idea who to serve with this complaint because we can't find any information on who's the chairman, who's the treasurer, or who's involved with this, what would be considered a ballot committee, and I'll go into what a ballot committee is. The graphic that was used in one of the billboards was actually paid for by the Augusta Richmond County government as a rendering for what the proposed area would look like if this was a non-binding referendum, but if this area were to be developed within that accord. So it's kind of common to have a rendering of, say, what Pont City Market would have looked like had when they were fixing it up. So that was what was on one of the billboards. Here is some of the evidence that came with the complaint. This was actually an article and raised some questions within the local media there, but this was attached to the complaint, and basically there was some concern because nobody knew who was involved, nobody knew who was advocating for this, and the second billboard, and I highlighted this in red, but I can read it for the commission, a second billboard featured an artist rendering a redeveloped mall site obtained by
I'm not able to
Davis.
see the exhibits on the screen.
Say that again, Mr. Tarver, you're not able to see the exhibit?
I'll see the 21002-C on the screen. I'm not seeing any of the exhibits that Mr. Kuzak is talking about right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tarver. Hold for just a minute. We're gonna see if we can get our IT fixed.
Mr. Tarver, can you see it now? It should be an article. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes, thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Tarver, can you see the highlighted portion of the red box?
I can.
All right, thank you.
All right, and so just to start over, this, what it says in here is a second billboard featured an artist rendering of a redeveloped mall site obtained by Davis, and that was referring to Mr. Hardy Davis, the mayor of Augusta, from Atlanta consulting firm, the Sizemore Group, with the instruction, vote May 22nd for the new James Brown Arena at Regency Mall. And so these were placed out in the community, and nobody knew who was behind them. So here is how we came to amend this case to include the parties and sort of explain how we got to where we are. On May 11th of 2021, a subpoena was issued to Lamar Advertising, who hosted these billboards in reference to any information pertaining to these billboards. And I have a picture of the subpoena, I believe, on the next slide that I can show you. On June 1st of 2021, Subpoena Response with an email chain on those who were involved with the billboard. There was an invoice, a contract, and other relevant documents in response to the subpoena they turned over to us at the commission. On June 17th of 2021, an amended complaint was issued in this matter with Mr. James McKinnon, Mr. Hardy Davis, the Augusta mayor, and Ms. Tanya Gibbons, who were added as the parties because of the information gleaned from the subpoena. Now this may be tough to see, but this is the subpoena that was issued to Lamar Advertising, and I'm going to specifically read what was asked for by the commission in response to this. There was just one request, but it's any and all records, correspondence, invoices, written or electronic, or any other documents relating to the purchase of the billboard with the text, vote yes for the new James Brown Arena at Regency Mall, which was purported to be paid for by concerned citizens of Richmond County from January 1st of 2018 to October 1st of 2018, inclusive of any records received up to this date of the hearing in this above referenced action. So it was specifically for these billboards, and what was included in the complaint and what was ultimately sent to Lamar Advertising as well was this picture. Obviously not the greatest quality, but this was one of the two billboards that says, it would say vote May 22nd for the new James Brown Arena at Regency Mall. Now the background of this is a ballot question. This was proposed on the May 22nd, 2018 primary election. So it was a non-binding question. We sort of see those sometimes on any sort of ballots, and it's sort of gauging the public feel of what should be done here. So it was on both the Republican and Democratic primary ballots. And the question was, where should the new James Brown Arena go? And you could either vote for the Regency Mall location or the current downtown location of where the James Brown Arena is. Now ultimately the voters on this referendum, on this ballot referendum, chose the downtown location. And then here are the two billboards that were in question in this matter. This is a little bit of a better picture, but you see on the left side, support South Augusta's future, vote yes for James Brown Arena at Regency Mall. And commissioners, if you see that small text below that, it says paid for by concerned citizens of Richmond County. And then it says May 22nd, which is the day of when the vote was to take place, and then get involved. The next one, if you see that, it says Gordon Highway up there where this billboard was located, but that also says vote May 22nd for the new James Brown Arena at Regency Mall, and that is the rendering I was referencing earlier, and I have a slide on that later in the presentation on this rendering. So let's start with, were they supposed to register, and what exactly a ballot committee is. A ballot committee is any campaign committee which accepts contributions or makes expenditures designed to bring about the approval or rejection by the voters of any proposed question which may appear on the ballot in this state. And they shall register with the commission and file campaign contribution disclosure reports as prescribed by this chapter. Now, this next part applies to this matter. In the case of any proposed question which is to appear on the ballot in a county or municipal election, it shall register and file disclosure reports with the same officials as prescribed by paragraph 3 or 4 of this subsection for candidates for county or municipal offices. So that would mean they would register with their local filing officials. Now in this, what triggers the requirement for registration is when such report shall be required if such campaign committee has received contributions which total more than $500, or if such campaign committee has made expenditures which total more than $500. And then all the advertising pertaining to the referendum shall identify the principal officer of such campaign committee by listing or stating the name and title of the principal officer. So here you didn't have that as well, that there was no principal officer, so there was a lot of confusion as to who actually purchased these billboards and who was involved. Also, the filing schedule set out here, it's a different filing schedule than candidates normally deal with. So you file a CCDR 15 days prior to the election taking place for a ballot committee. And then a final report shall be filed prior to December 31st of the election year. So there's the CCDR prior to the election, and then a termination. Normally they file a termination. We've seen in ballot committees that normally register with us. We normally see that a couple weeks after the elections in this matter, or not in this matter, but in any ballot committees, they normally file a termination. It's normally for the limited purpose of just what's on the ballot, and then they dissolve fairly quickly. So another trigger of if you have to register is there any express advocacy that is in the messaging of what would be on the billboard? And we've previously taken up this sort of question of when do you engage in express advocacy and when is it triggered that you have to register? And if you use the words such as vote for, elect, support, cast your ballot for, Smith for Congress, vote against, defeat, reject, that's what triggers registration. So if we go back and we look, we have vote yes, and then vote for, or vote May 22nd for. So we have those triggering, I guess, words for the requirement of registration. So it's a two-part test. Was there express advocacy? Obviously with these two, yes, there was express advocacy. And then was that $500 in contributions or expenditures triggered as well? And I'm going to go to the next slide that's a little bigger so you may be able to see, but this is the contract and invoice that Lamar sent in this matter, which it was for $3,950 for these two billboards, which was on Gordon Highway at Deans Bridge and Gordon 500 at Deans Bridge. So there was two billboards that they were able to turn over this invoice for, an invoice of contract. And this was signed by James McKinnon of Cardinal Management. So just to give you a background of who was involved, I'm going to go over what Lamar ultimately turned over in this case. It's important to remember that this group was never registered with any entity. It's a dark money group in that we don't know who was actually the treasurer, the chairperson. They don't exist on paper. It is just a purely fictional entity that funded these billboards. And Lamar Advertising turned over emails with the parties involved that ultimately decided on what was on the billboard or the graphics that were used on the billboard, and then ultimately agreed to the contract. So there's some parties, and we'll go over the email chain, but Mr. Brandon Garrett is a Lamar Advertising agent. He sold the billboard space. Randy Boker was a Lamar Advertising agent as well, who formatted the billboard. There's James McKinnon, who works for Cardinal Management, and they own the Regency Mall site where where this development would have been. There's Mr. Davis, who's the mayor of Augusta, and Ms. Gibbons, who is the former assistant to Mr. Davis. There's also Trey Williams, who works at the Augusta Blueprint, which is a local print shop, and he formatted the rendering to ultimately be able to fit it onto the billboard and get it formatted for that purpose. Now, here's the email chain from the sale of the billboard. It's in not the best order in the world, so I'm going to try to explain as much as I can using the dates on here. But it starts with, I'm going to start right here, and if you'll look at the middle of this chain, or of this email right here, this is Trey Williams, and ultimately, do you see the JPEGs at the bottom of the screen? Where it says there's four files that would be files that were a part of this email. So there's 4 JPEGs down there that say Regency Mall 14 by 48 feet, Regency Mall 14 by 48, it's 0.01 JPEG, 0.02 JPEG, and then Regency Mall 14 by 48 feet, -01 JPEG, Regency Mall 14 by 48 feet, -02 JPEG. So there are two separate files, 2 separate renderings of what the pictures could be. There is an email that goes out, and it says, here are the PDF files instead of the TLF files. Maybe these will work better for them. And then there is a forward for the templates, and this is on August 13th of 2018. And it's forwarded by James McKinnon. And then Trey Williams, above that, after Mr. McKinnon forwards this email, says, here are 2 samples of the smaller billboard. And those would be the JPEGs that I was referencing earlier. So that's August 13th, 2018 at 6:21 p.m. On April 13th, or that was Friday, April 13th, 2018 at 6:21. On April 13th, 2018 at 7:34 p.m., so roughly about an hour and 10 minutes later, there's Hardy Davis Jr., which is hardydavis@gmail.com, wrote, let's go with the first template picture. Now, that would be the template that ultimately makes its way onto the billboard. So it's that template picture for Regency Mall, vote yes, vote for Regency Mall on May 22nd. Now from there, you have Mr. McKinnon, who roughly about an hour and a half after that, on Friday, April 13th, says, agreed. And then from Trey Williams, we have to James McKinnon, but also CCing Hardy Davis at gmail.com and Tanya Gibbons as well on the templates. And it says, this is the native file. I've also attached the JPEGs for reference. Please let me know if they cannot use these files and would like them sent in a different manner. And then we have on Monday, April 16th, 2018, Brandon Garrett, who is the agent they dealt with for selling this billboard, forwarding this. And then Randy Boker at Lamar saying, hi James, can you please send the fonts for the Illustrator file or convert the text to outlines and resend? Thanks. And that's from Lamar to Mr. McKinnon. And then at the top it says, hello Randy, sorry I'm boarding a plane, will be unavailable until tomorrow afternoon. Please send this to Trey Williams at augustablue.com. He will convert it into whatever format you need without me being the middleman, and that's for the formatting of the billboard. And then you have Mr. Garrett saying to Mr. McKinnon, in response, RE Regency Billboard, saying they are ordered. And this is just, and this was the next email I got it, we are good to go. So saying we're good to go on the billboards. And these were the renderings they turned over. They came out in a horrible, horrible, I guess, color, but this was ultimately what was being, what made its way onto the billboard. It's just a horrible quality. Here is the actual contract I showed you earlier that was agreed to by Mr. McKinnon for these 2 billboards that was turned over in reference to this subpoena. And it shows the locations, the work that was done, the amount. So that was and it says activate by 4/12/18, which would have been before the election. I thought it was interesting that there were some comments. You see Mr. Davis on this email chain saying, go with that template picture. There was some question in the community over who was involved with this. And he got questioned about it numerous times. And I think this is relevant because you can't deny that he's on the email chain about this, about these billboards. But I think this is particularly relevant for this case and his involvement. And there should be subtitles as well if y'all can't hear.
I can't really do that, Mr. Cusack.
I've got my own election campaign, and we're very focused.
And I can narrate if you want.
It's not playing on the
Yes.
screen.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, it's not playing on the screen, but give it one more try.
Okay, let me see if I can rewind.
So, I think it's certainly appropriate.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
It's playing now, see if you can rewind it and start.
Yes, I
the
just
beginning.
Turn it up. Put the mic down. Put the mic down there.
I've got my Well, I certainly can't answer the question of who's doing that. I've got my own reelection campaign that we're very focused on. I think it's certainly appropriate for folks to engage in this discussion. You've asked me on multiple occasions, whether it be via text messages or whether it be through calls. You've asked me on multiple occasions, was that something that happened from the mayor's office? We have emphatically stated on more than one occasion that no, not only did we not coordinate it, not only were we not involved in it. And so, once again, you're asking that question, and it's the same. So I think you would have to ask the parties who not only put the billboards up, who are doing the videos. That's where that question really should be focused on. What we've spent the last allows us to continue to get this message of one investor to the citizens who have supported us in the past and that we're expecting to support us going forward.
Because I have a new question, but piggyback, sure, this question. Do you know who behind
I don't.
I just want to make sure everyone caught that.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily hear all of it. I heard the second question. The first question was a little garbled from what I assume was a female reporter. I was able to hear Mayor Davis's comments, which I think are the relevant comments.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Commissioners, were you all able to hear? Okay.
And then I do have, and this piggybacks on what was said, but this was the quote is, you've asked me on multiple occasions, was that something that happened from the mayor's office? And we have emphatically stated that no, not only did we not coordinate it, we are not involved with it. a few days before election. And so once again, you're asking that question. It's the same. I think you would have to ask the parties who not only put up the billboards, but who are doing the videos. That's what this question should be focused on. So it's pretty obvious he was involved, he knew who was doing it, but yet the public comments were, for whatever reason, trying to put distance between this. There was some mention of the data file, and this is relevant for the one billboard that had the rendering, but there was some questions over how that file got onto the billboard that was asked by the local media. In that money came out of the budget from the mayor's office to pay for it, and here is in which Mayor Davis said it absolutely did as it should have had, and there are no problems with that. There was a question that who paid for this drawing showing what the area would look like, and that it was the Augusta taxpayers that had ultimately paid for it. And then that was ultimately what sort of started this investigation was how did it end up, what the local media was asking the question, how did this native file that was ordered by the Augusta Richmond government, by the mayor's office, end up on a billboard that was advocating for this, and we don't know who's involved. So that's sort of why there were some questions about this billboard that were brewing up. And so here's that rendering that it's a little bit of a better picture that ended up on the billboard, on one of the billboards. And it said this rendering of proposed redevelopment at Regency Mall done by an unknown artist was provided by Mayor Hardy Davis. The mall owners revised terms they seek from Augusta this week ahead of a Thursday deadline set by the Augusta Commission. So I guess there was some redevelopment that was going to go into this area, and this was the rendering of what it could look like. From my understanding, it does not look like this at all. It's a sort of an area that the land is not worth very much, so there's some proposed redevelopment of this land. So there's two violations that are alleged in this matter. It's that they never registered as a ballot committee, that respondents violated 21.534A2 when they failed to register with the Augusta Richmond County Election Superintendent as a ballot committee prior to the acceptance of contributions and making expenditures, and that they were required to file a disclosure report 15 days prior to the election that was held on May 22nd, 2018. They failed to file this campaign contribution disclosure report, which would have been due on May 7th of 2018 in violation of 21.534A2. So since this was never registered, they never filed a CCDR. They were required to do both, as we saw by them accepting or spending more than $500 and then expressly advocating for the passage of something that appeared on the ballot. And I would just ask you find probable cause in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cusack? Go ahead, Mr. Thompson. Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner.
So who actually paid for it?
So it would be paid for by James McKinnon.
Was it Cardinal? So one individual paid for it?
Yes, Cardinal Management through James McKinnon.
So they didn't accept contributions. So one individual. So in the article that you have, Mr. Lane is quoted that says a private individual or company would not have to make the same disclosures. Okay? Do you disagree, or maybe he wasn't quoted properly? Do you disagree that a single person or company would not have to register and report?
In the way this was, yes, because what we're dealing with here is not only, there is some other activity involved as well. So we're keying on the billboards on this, but there are videos as well, so we don't know exactly, so we're at the probable cause stage, right?
Sure.
We don't know exactly how this was formed. I haven't seen any bank records that back that up. I've seen this invoice, but we haven't yet to see any bank records that would say that this was paid for by one person. We don't know how it was funded. It's impossible to know that without actually seeing the records behind it.
But you don't have any evidence to show that, except for communication amongst several people talking about it, that more than one person paid for it. I mean, what you're showing us right now is one invoice to one company.
Correct, yes. But in a matter, the investigation for how this would be carried out would be we have yet to hear, we have served Mr. McKinnon, we've yet to hear from him. So we have no way of knowing how this was funded. I can't just go, if somebody turns over an invoice to me, well, I need to see exactly the bank records that back this up that you paid for it. I don't know how it was funded. And I think ultimately, from the probable cause determination, that's why you need to go forward to try to figure out exactly how this was funded. Exactly what the scope of any more information or any more activity that occurred.
Have you seen the videos?
They were removed from Facebook.
Mr. Cusack, do you have any additional information as to who the concerned citizens of Richmond County might be? Who makes up that group?
Just those 3 individuals who were on that email chain.
Email chain, right?
Who were not with Lamar. It certainly could expand once we are able to go to the Office of State Administrative Hearings and figure out more information and gather more information. But as of right now, it's just those individuals based on this. And it's tough, an investigation like this, and I believe we've had mailers that have been, where we've tried to figure out who is sending out anonymous mailers that ultimately go back to like an address that doesn't exist. Right here, there's probably more evidence out there, but there's no way for us to figure out where exactly it is unless we can get forward and start questioning people. So we're trying to meet that probable cause burden right now to expand the investigation to figure out more information of exactly what was the totality of this group, but also this was, honestly, I sent the subpoena to Lamar thinking we weren't going to get a hit, that it was not going to be enough information to actually amend this complaint and do anything with it. So right now, it's just pushing this investigation forward to figure out like the total amount of what was spent, what was done, and to push it forward to where we can start questioning people about it.
So I just want to make sure I understand the case. We've got this billboard that has at the bottom paid for by the concerned citizens of Richmond County. We don't have any registration from this group as any type of entity within, well, that would be covered by the act, am I correct?
Correct.
All right, so we issue a subpoena to Lamar Advertising. Lamar Advertising gives us certain documents and information that identifies not only these renderings and the mock-ups, but an email chain that identifies these particular individuals. These individuals are not named as the citizens of Richmond County, but they're the ones, at least from as best we can tell, behind the billboard. And then we've got a contract for services that, $39.50 was one, and what was the amount of the other?
Oh, that was the total for both.
That was a
of
total
them.
of $39.50,
Yes.
right? And none of these individuals are registered. Did I accurately summarize the case? And so
Yes.
now we're here at a probable cause hearing.
Yes, and that's part of it. I can't tell you who is ultimately everybody involved, but I can give you a picture of what we gleaned from this information.
And we know that the $39.50 in total invoices were paid by Mr. McKinnon and/or Cardinal Management.
I haven't seen that they were actually paid by. I've seen the invoice that was sent to them, but I haven't seen where they were paid for by him. And
Okay.
it was billed to him.
It was billed to him, and we
Yes.
don't have any evidence, at least as we're here today, as to whether or not they were actually paid. The invoice was paid. Or do we know?
That I know, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
So I kind of hope this is for the commissioners as well. I mean, I believe we've run into a problem before that if we don't set down all the violations in a probable cause, and we have a hard time asserting them to, if it goes to administrative law judge. Is that true or not?
If, take this hypothetically,
If we move forward, say depositions occur, we glean more information, we glean evidence of more violations, we would have to bring it back to the commission to add violations before those could then go forward to us.
Okay. Is there a reason, Mr. Kuzak, that we're not asserting a violation since you're looking for a probable cause that the committee should have registered? Is there a reason you haven't asserted that there's a violation that the principal officer was not named on that billboard? Because that would be a separate violation as well.
Correct.
Is there a reason we're not doing that?
No, and that That was one where I didn't know what the principal officer would be, so I wanted to sort of just focus on this lack of registration, and then the campaign contribution disclosure report. But that is something down the line, and once we glean more information,
So this is probably going to have to come back to us.
Probably.
more than likely.
I don't really understand. I mean, what, I guess I don't understand why we're doing a probable cause if we don't have all the information. We're not going to, just because we find a probable cause, it doesn't give the agency any more power to find out these additional information. Well, what am I missing here?
Well,
I'm not sure. Let Secretary Myers back.
I think I understand your question. The answer is twofold. One, you move forward with the Department of Law conducting depositions and issuing subpoenas. Did we subpoena Mr. McKinnon for his bank records?
Yes,
And he didn't respond to the subpoena?
yes.
There's as we are aware, there's a long process to have that enforced. We go to the Department of Law, they issue subpoenas in front of a court, you have contempt powers. So,
That answers that.
yeah. And then there's the area where we can conduct depositions, and if people refuse to answer questions under oath, and the depositions, there's also legalities for that.
We can use negative inference at that point, so that's part of the reason. But this is using sort of the safest violations in this matter.
I want to make sure I understand the context of Chairman Thompson's question. I'm hearing the chairman say that there may be other violations that we could go back, or that the commission staff might go back and assert at a different time, and it may come to us again. I didn't hear you suggest, Commissioner Thompson, that the issue before us may or may not be a violation.
Well, I haven't, so my concern right now is, I haven't seen anything that shows that, there's a violation. I mean, I understand what we're saying is that we've issued a subpoena and it was not responded to. I just don't know if there's enough right here for a probable cause. That's what was my concern.
Let's do this. Let's pause. Commissioner Watts, any questions for Mr. Cusack? All right. Let's give Mr. Tarver, you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Tarver, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that the complaint against Carly Davis Jr. and Tommy Gibbons be dismissed on the basis that we believe that it lacks any evidence to show that there's probable cause to believe that there's a lot of information that was left or excluded from Mr. Cusack's presentation to the commission. One is as it relates to Tanya Gibbons. Tanya Gibbons was at the time an employee of the city of Augusta. She worked in the mayor's office. Her responsibility was community outreach, and so information coming in from the community about specific initiatives would have been directed to her. The only evidence that's been presented up to this point is one email that shows that she was listed as she was copied on an email. She didn't send any emails. She didn't respond to any emails. She certainly is not an office holder or is not sought to hold any type of office. And I think it's just unconscionable that somebody would be named as a respondent in a complaint like this for virtually doing her job, the job that she was paid for by the city of Augusta. So on that basis, I would certainly would ask the commission to dismiss as against Tanya Gibbons. I want to make it clear also that I don't represent James McKinnon. James McKinnon is a resident, as I understand it, a resident of the state of New York. He is aware of these proceedings, but he has chosen not to respond, not to engage or participate in any manner. At the time that this case these billboards were created, Mr. McKinnon was, and I believe he still is, a manager for Cardinal Management. And Cardinal Management is Mr. McKinnon's family-owned business. He, I believe, is part of the family by virtue of marriage. He married one of the daughters of the owners of Cardinal Management. Cardinal Cardinal Management owns the Regency Mall property in Augusta. It's, how many acre property is it? It's a 77 acre property that formerly, held the Regency Mall, which is now completely closed and abandoned. For years, Cardinelli Management has sought to find a buyer for that property or some use for it. And in conjunction with an initiative by Mayor Davis called the SOGO Initiative, South of Boards Highway Initiative, Mayor Davis has sought to revitalize South Richmond County and particularly the area that occupies the Regency Mall area. And so it would seem logical that Mr. McKinnon and anybody that wanted to find a use for this abandoned mall that's become an eyesore and a public nuisance for Augusta would reach out to the mayor's office, because the mayor had an existing initiative called the SOGO Initiative. And that was primarily the mayor's role there, or the reason that the mayor was involved, or they sought to involve the mayor in this. The mayor agreed with them that something should be done with the Regency Mall property. The Coliseum Authority was looking for a site for the new James Brown Arena, and the mayor, in his capacity as mayor, endorsed the Regency Mall location as a potential site for the James Brown Arena. At no time was it, and I've seen no information that indicates that the mayor, Mayor Hardy Davis or Tiny Gibbons sought to create any type of ballot initiative. Mr. McKinnon, if the commission was able to speak with him, would confirm that Cardinelli Management contracted for these billboards and paid for them as part of his function as a manager trying to dispose of his property. He wanted to either sell it or lease it long term, and he saw the opportunity to do that to the city of Augusta as a potential way for them to further use this property. But certainly, and the point that was raised in one of the questions, Mr. McKinnon is a private individual, but I believe that he would share with the commission that Cardinal Management, the company, actually paid for the billboards, and the billboards, as I understand it, were paid for. There were there's no other indication that any other funds were solicited or collected regarding the billboards. And the information about who paid for the billboards is simply misguided. The city of Augusta paid for the artist renderings and the creation of the renderings as part of their promotion of a new site for the James Brown Arena.
Excuse me, Mr. Tarver?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just I wanted to make sure that the information I was providing, but.
Well, hang on a second, Mr. Tarver, Mr. Tarver, I want to make sure we've got an accurate record. I see you've got some folks there in the room with you. We've heard some conversation in the background. Does either one of those gentlemen want to speak or want to be identified as witnesses or making a presentation?
Well, I'd like to identify, I have in the room with me, I have our partner, Hardy Davis Jr.,
Okay.
who is a respondent in this matter, and I have Tanya Gibbons, who has also responded. And then I have my colleague, Rachel Ray, who is an attorney, and she has joined me in the representation of Ms. Gibbons and Mr. Davis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tarver.
And what I wanted to clarify was that the renderings were created as part of the effort to get community approval and support for a new James Brown Arena. And it's shown on one of the exhibits from Mr. Cusack. He put up and left for quite a while an exhibit of an article by Susan McCord that included the rendering. Those renderings were made available to anyone in the community who asked, and primarily the media, but anyone in the community that wanted access to those renderings could receive them. And as a result of that, those renderings being shared, folks who requested them in the community, they appeared in articles like the Augusta Chronicle article written by Susan McCord that included the rendering. So the fact that, I mean, any suggestion that these renderings were created or prepared solely for use on the billboards is simply not true. Those renderings were available and circulated throughout the community, and Mr. McKinnon or anyone else had access to them. I would also take issue with Mr. Kuzak's statement that the Regency Mall land was not worth very much. You know, that's the central issue that has plagued this community for years, and that is that Cardinal Management, who owns that property, believes that it's worth millions, and they want to be either paid millions for it by virtue of a purchase, or they want to be paid millions for it by virtue of a lease. And again, the James Brown Arena, the location of it, if it had been selected as the site for the new James Brown Arena, that would have accomplished that fact. But I would also take issue with the fact that we don't know, Mr. Kuzak made the statement that he didn't know how the billboards were funded. We do exactly know how they were funded. They were funded by Cardinal Management. It's what they do as part of their business. They develop, sell, or lease real estate. And the Regency Mall property was one of those properties that they were seeking to sell or lease. I don't believe that there is, I believe that the record shows that there's clearly no evidence to support probable cause as to Tanya Gibbons, other than her name appearing as a person's copy on an email. And again, if a minimum amount of additional investigation had taken place, it would have shown that she was copied merely because that was her role, that was her job, that was what the city of Augusta paid her to do, to interact with individuals in the community. And I would point out that generally, as part of her job and as part of Mayor Davis's role as mayor of Augusta, it wasn't their responsibility, nor did it was not their practice to ask the individuals who contacted the mayor's office in support of a particular initiative, whether or not they were registered ballot committee. I think that takes it a bit farther than the statute requires for individuals who interact with others to determine whether or not they were registered as a ballot committee. As mayor, he had individuals who had reached out to him in support of an initiative that he was proposing, the SOGO initiative. They agreed with his position that something should be done with the Regency Mall property, and that would be a great benefit to South Augusta, South Richmond County, and that he engaged with those folks regarding their support of his initiative. Now, if you ask him today if he regrets responding to that email with that little one-sentence response, certainly he does. If he had known that this was going to happen, he would have not offered his opinion about which billboard looked the best. But by doing so, it certainly doesn't mean that he was involved in, created, led anything to do with this concerned citizens of Richmond County. Doesn't know where that name came from. Nobody seems to know where that name comes from or who put it on the billboard, other than it may have come from Cardinal Management and James McKinnon, the people who contracted for the billboards and who paid for them. And so on that basis, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I would seek that finding a no probable cause as to Hardy Davis Jr. and as to Tanya Gibbons. I don't believe that there is sufficient evidence to support a finding a probable cause as to those two. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tarver. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Tarver? Commissioner Thompson?
Mr. Tarver, you said that Ms. Gibbons was doing this in her official capacity. responding to the email. She wasn't just copied, she was actually responded. You said she was doing this in her official capacity as a worker for Augusta, the city of Augusta? Is that what you stated?
That's what I said, and I think that's, if I understood you, Ms. Gibbons did not respond to that email. She was only copied on that email chain.
No, she provided the files, I believe, in the email chain we have.
That was Trent Williams, and he was an employee of Augusta Blueprint.
I'm gonna look to see that for sure. Well, I guess I'm curious if she was in her official capacity, why it was not an augusta.gov email. It looks like it's a personal email. Same way with Mr. Davis or Mayor Davis.
I have Ms. Gibbons here, if you'd like to ask, I don't know why, it wasn't an official email address. I'll be happy, can you respond to that? Well, speak loud to it.
Yes, I don't recall, most of these emails, but in a role like mine, you get thousands of these emails. People send them to you, and I know Augusta Blueprint had both emails, so that could be why. I mean, I really can't recall why they sent it to one and not the other.
Well, you're able to hear, Commissioner.
We were, thank you, Mr. Tarver. And thank you, Ms. Gibbons.
Yes.
I had a question for you, Mr. Tarver. On April 13th, 2018 at 7:34 p.m., according to the evidence, Mayor Davis from his Gmail account says, let's go with the first template. And that's after Mr. Williams from his AugustaBlue.com account forwards the two samples of the smaller billboard. That's at 6:21 p.m. of the same date. My question for you, Mr. Tarver, is that template that that Mayor Davis signed off on, do you know whether it had at the bottom of it what Mr. Cusack has offered as an exhibit, where it says paid for by the, I believe it's the concerned citizens of Richmond County? Did it have that, attribution at the bottom of it?
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna let Mayor Davis answer that one.
I'd love to hear from you, Mayor Davis.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and Mr. Cusack, I appreciate the opportunity to be before you today. I would like to ask Mr. Cusack to put that back up because I don't have that in front of me. Again, this has been 4 years ago, and absent having seen it, I'm not sure if it had a band on it or not with that statement. I just can't speak to that without having seen it.
Hold on, Mayor Davis, we're trying to bring it back up.
Here's both.
All right.
These were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you see that, Mayor Davis?
It is not up on the screen yet.
Give it a minute, it's here in ours, there's sometimes a bit of a delay. Can you see anything on your screen?
No, that's it. Yes, sir. The view of the commission and chamber.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
What about now? Okay, right. So on the left, you see it says support South Augusta's future, vote yes, then the big check box for James Brown Arena at Regency Mall. Now it's very small print, but the representation by Mr. Cusack is, it says paid for by concerned citizens of Richmond County. And then down at the bottom it says May 22, get involved. You see that?
I do see that, and I do not recall that being on there, without having seen it again. I don't recall that, Chairman Thompson.
You don't recall it being on there when you,
I don't.
when Terry Williams.
Right. I do not recall that being on there.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Tarver? Go ahead, Commissioner Watson.
No, this one's for Mr. Cusack.
Okay.
So I want to make sure I've got this right. Is the evidence, we're basing a failure to register on largely this email chain?
Yes.
And the email chain, as I understand it, reflects an approval of a template.
Of these two billboards. Ultimately, the email chain is the approval of the template and then these two billboards.
Right, but what evidence do we have of the three individuals accepting any money or attempting to accept any money to fund these billboards?
Or making an expenditure, I assume.
Expenditures over 500 trigger registration, so this would have been $39.50.
Right, I'm just saying, if there's an email that says, I approve spending X, show me that. Right now, the emails say, I like this template,
So
unless I'm missing something.
the invoice for these two, so the email comes and the email chain is ultimately leading to the approval of these two billboards at those locations for $3,950 that is spent on these particular billboards.
Well, okay. I mean,
So the
but
expenditure.
who said that? Who said, I approve spending this amount of money to go here? Because, again, at least for the two individuals in the room with Mr. Tarver, all I've seen, unless I'm missing something, is that somebody provided some files and somebody said, I like the way this one looks.
So I don't think any evidence is ever going to show, hey, let's put these billboards up there at this location and pay X amount of dollars. You have to look at sort of the circumstantial evidence around it. This is what was turned over for these specific billboards in which $3,950 was spent. So that's an expenditure for these billboards. You agree with me, right?
Yes, the money was spent, but I'm trying to link the three people to the concerned citizens for, I can't read it.
Richmond County.
Richmond County.
Which doesn't exist. So there's no way for us to know who is actually involved. This group doesn't exist. We don't know who is actually involved.
I understand what we're trying to do, okay, but
There's two things that trigger the registration here. It's the express advocacy and then the making expenditure over $500 here. It's contribution or expenditure. So either one.
All right, so can I take a snap?
Go ahead, Sure. Secretary Monaghan.
So, and I'm going to dovetail into a question Mr. Thompson had earlier. With the ballot committee, we have an email chain where the mayor says, let's go with this one. And then the individual who is invoiced says agreed. And they forward it on to the company and we see these billboards it created. We subpoenaed Lamar Billboards for any invoices that paid for the creation and implementation of these signs. The only invoice they provided was the one provided Mr. McKinnon. Logically, someone paid for it. And if the billboard company is saying, in response to your subpoena, this is who we invoiced to pay for it, I think it's a reasonable assumption that Mr. McKinnon paid for it. The second question being, whether a single citizen has to register. Well, we've got an email chain that shows it wasn't just one person. Mayor Davis was the first one to say, let's go with this design. And Mr. McKinnon, who again presumably paid for it because it wasn't done for free, said agreed, and they forwarded it over and actually involved a third party so that he wouldn't be the middleman. So I think we've got more than just one citizen, and I think it's a reasonable assumption that the billboard company who was requested an invoice of who paid for these provided the invoice that said we sent Mr. McKinnon that he then paid for it.
And commissioners, to interject on 2 points. The reason why these are personal emails, these aren't subject to open records. So if they're not government emails, they're not subject to open records, so that would shield your involvement in it. The second thing is, if what Mr. Tarver is saying about, and this was one of the official official duties of Ms. Gibbons, then we have a bigger issue because that's a 30.2 agency violation in which the city of Augusta is engaging in political advocacy in an election. So in your official capacity, that is an agency contribution from the city of Augusta for this specific purpose. So if that's the case, then that's a different violation. It's not alleged here, but the city should be staying out of this in their official
I
capacity.
don't know that you can go there.
Hang on, Mr. Thompson, hang on. Commissioner Watson?
And I'm not saying I want to go there, but I'm just saying.
Commissioner, oh, okay, Commissioner Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't, you don't have any evidence that she responded, she's just copied on it, it wasn't her official one, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you see where I'm saying, yeah, where I'm going with that.
This is for Mr. Amati. Mr. Amati, are you saying that a ballot committee is, if more than one person is communicating about it, so it's not based on just the expenditure? So if you have, if one individual pays for everything, but he talks to 2 or 3 other people who do not contribute or pay for anything, is it your opinion that that is a ballot committee because more than one person is communicating about it?
You have to look at each case by case. But in this case, if you have multiple people deciding what the ballot committee or the unregistered ballot committee is going to do, then yes, you have a committee.
One person may have paid for it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want to know that.
I want to jump in on that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Watson.
Ultimately, a ballot committee can just be one person. One person can form, fund, do whatever they need to do. Yeah, that's right. Okay. I guess where I'm having a disconnect here is it looks like we're all in agreement that McKinnon paid for something, the billboards. And we're linking the other two that are with Mr. Tarver based on a provision of the files and an approval of a template or a recommendation of one of the templates for the billboard. If there's something more, please let me know for those two.
There are videos out there that we don't, and we're at the probable cause stage.
I understand.
Yeah, which this-
I've been here for a few years. I get
I
that.
get that, but like, I don't know how to explain probable cause more than when you show up, when you don't register, all right? When you don't register at all, and we have no idea who's involved, and then we bring you everyone who's involved, and everyone, that further questions need to be answered. And if it's just McKinnon going forward, well, we're not gonna get those answers. If we can actually move forward and question people, that is what we're establishing with probable cause. Now, I don't know, this is an evidence where we have to go out and get this. Where else do we go other than directly questioning people at the Office of State Administrative Hearings, or taking depositions, or figuring further out what the questions are in this case and what those answers are? I just have a tough time saying that probable cause has not been established by everyone involved here. When you don't register, when you're trying to shield who's involved from the public, and then we actually bring you those people that are involved, that's not establishing probable cause to further this case and figure out what exactly went on here. I mean, that's just the definition of probable cause there. Like, being involved here, you didn't register, there's for some reason a willingness to hide behind this, and then when we bring you evidence that they're actually involved in approving what this ballot committee is doing, demonstrating some control over the ballot committee, that probable cause hasn't been met. I don't understand that at all, I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm gonna go.
I'd like to respond to that, because I think that some of the information that's being offered is just incorrect factually, and it's certainly incorrect from a legal standpoint. You know, one issue as it relates to the use of the email. The fact that they use those emails does not shield, those email addresses does not shield them from the Open Records Act. I think the law is clear that if they use personal emails, anything other than Augusta.gov, if they use it for an official government function, then they would be subject to the Open Records Act. So that doesn't shield Ms. Gibbons or Ms. Davis from disclosing what they communicated, and that's quite frankly one of the reasons that the commission was able to get the email chain that they're now offering as evidence against them, is because it wasn't shielded from the Open Records Act. And again, I point out again that Ms. Gibbons did not respond, did not initiate, all she was all that she, the only thing that occurred was that she was copied on an email. And if Mr. Kuzak or the commission would go back and look at the April 13th of 2018, she was an employee of the city of Augusta, employed in the mayor's office, and her responsibility was community outreach, responding to. So what you're suggesting, what you seem to be suggesting, that anytime somebody from the community were to reach out or communicate with Ms. Gibbons in her official capacity as an employee of the city of Augusta, if they were not a registered ballot committee, that she would be included in that process. And I think that that's a stretch, and certainly not not what the statute indicated. And the same would apply for Mayor Davis. Mayor Davis, it was appropriate for Mayor Davis as mayor of Augusta to have a SOGO initiative, South of Gordon Highway initiative. It was appropriate for Mayor Davis in his capacity as mayor of Augusta to advocate for or to identify the Richmond County site as his preferred site for the new James Brown Arena if it's ever going to be constructed. The fact that James McKinnon, in his capacity as a manager for Cardinal Management, seized upon that initiative and decided that this may be a way for my company, Cardinal Management, to either sell or lease or enter into a long-term lease for this property that's been a thorn in our side for years, for over a decade. There's nothing improper for Mayor Davis to communicate with him about that and for him to respond to his inquiries. And it doesn't mean that Mayor Davis created or was a part of any unregistered ballot committee. And I think that the information that's being offered in support of a finding of probable cause is very lacking at this point. And the probable cause should not be found in this case as to Tanya Gibbons and Mayor Davis. And I would point out that Mr. McKinnon has indicated that he is not going to respond. He is a resident of New York, the state of New York. We have reached out to him and encouraged him to respond in an attempt to help clarify some of the confusion that has come out of these questions, and he has chosen not to do so. And so I don't know what a finding of probable cause would do other than to result in a lot more effort, a lot more a greater expenditure of funds that certainly my clients don't have personally to expend in an attempt to get Mr. McKinnon to respond from New York or to agree to admit to be a respondent in this action.
Thank you, Mr. Tarver. Secretary Amati?
I'll let Commissioner Watts go first.
Commissioner Watts?
I have a question, Mr. Kuzak. Is it a violation of the Campaign Finance Act to, give a recommendation as to what rendering should be used that would be the result of an expenditure?
In this context, yes.
Why?
So, you cannot register as a ballot committee. All right, let's start from there. Let's go through this whole case. Let's go through.
Actually, hold on real quick.
Okay.
Because I think I can cut through it. Are we, by virtue of the evidence that is being presented today, are you asking for probable cause that Ms. Gibbons, Mayor Davis, and Mr. McKinnon control the concerns for Richmond County?
Yes.
Okay. And the law, I understand that, but the violation of the act is the expenditure made.
That triggers the registration.
For those, right, okay.
Yes.
Understood. Good. So, I'm kind of at a...
Yeah. Let me see if I can ask somewhat of a related question. And Secretary Amati, I'd like you to weigh in. And Mr. Lane, I'd like you to weigh in as well based on your experience. Mr. Cusack, if the complaint is brought against the concerned citizens of Richmond County, James McKinnon, Hardy Davis Jr., and Tonya Gibbons, what, if any, is the commission's authority or discretion to find probable cause as to some of those parties, but not others. You know, in the civil context, we call it joint and several liability.
Right.
What is the commission's authority to find probable cause as to some or not others? Or is this a, you know, all or nothing? Go ahead, Mr. Cusack, go, Mr. Monty, Secretary Monty, go ahead.
And this comes back to the point I was gonna make a minute ago. I think there certainly can be an argument made that Ms. Gibbons does not have involvement, but Mr. Davis does. I think that's a fair argument that can be made. I think theoretically, and I don't know which way this is gonna go, but in theory, a motion could be made, seconded, and passed that found probable cause against some respondents and not others. So I think from these email chains, I think it's a little, I mean, I don't buy it, that the mayor says, let's do this. And then the one putting the bill says, agreed, I'm gonna go do that, and the mayor was not involved at all in this unregistered ballot committee. That,
I guess, but I gotta pause you, because that's my key question. Is the involvement a violation of the law, or does he have to control or be, you know, a manager, or however you want to describe it, as part of the ballot committee?
it's a fact question as to what constitutes a ballot committee. Is there more than one person involved in the decision-making process of that organization? And if you accept that Mr. Davis was involved in making that decision, he is a member. If you agree with Mr. Tarver that he was passing on his recommendation, but that didn't really matter, they could do whatever they wanted, and that his involvement didn't influence the decision, then it's not a ballot committee.
And I would, real quick, I would remind the commissioners and our team of crack lawyers, Secretary Monty, I think, makes the point, this is a fact question that will be determined at some point. The legal standard that we're trying to determine today is whether or not there's probable cause with respect to the allegations made in the complaint. Not, if I'm correct, not whether or not a violation of the statute occurred, whether there is probable cause
To believe,
to
yes.
believe that a violation of the act occurred. I'm going to go with Commissioner Watts and then Commissioner Thompson.
That was my question. I asked it completely on her.
Okay. Commissioner Thompson.
Why is Cardinal Management not listed? Since the invoice is to Cardinal Management, why is the corporation Cardinal Management not responded? Especially since James McKinnon is not a resident.
And Commissioner Thompson, good question.
But
I'm not sure that is a question that we need to resolve for purposes of the probable cause hearing, probable cause against these folks. But, Mr. Cusack, go ahead and answer.
And it may be that the further investigation happens and we bring them back as a part.
But hold up.
In the exhibit, in Exhibit C, it lists James McKinnon as the signature and identifies as the owner of Cardinal Management. So if you're asking why isn't the corporation involved, he's the owner of the corporation. You could, I suppose you could attach him as an additional party, but I don't think that makes him an improper party.
no, I didn't say he was improper, but I mean, if he's not here, you're not gonna get a subpoena to New York.
Right.
But
Well, I don't know that we knew he was a citizen of New York.
But Cardinal Management is here to do
And
that.
I think we're having a discussion, again, in the civil context, we'd be talking about who is a necessary and indispensable party in order to gain full relief. And that's a discussion for another day. All right. I'm gonna ask, do the commissioners have any other questions for Mr. Tarver or Mr. Cusack? Commissioner Watts.
So, if we determine that there's probable cause to believe that a violation of the act occurred, let's, again, by one, two, or all three of the parties, and you will go forward and collect more evidence, and then you don't have to revisit these two allegations with us, but if you add additional ones, you will have to come back.
If we do add additional ones, and it may be something where we say we're good on these two, we go forward, or it depends. It ultimately depends down the line, but we could come back and add more allegations, represent the additional evidence we uncover, or we could decide to move forward if it's just, say, one allegation. Haven't made that. It depends on what the evidence shows.
Sure. And again, I understand Ms. Gibbons was a passive recipient, I think, of these emails, but for Mayor Davis, the only evidence we have that he was involved with this ballot committee is that a rendering of a billboard was sent to him and he chose one.
And can I respond to that real quick?
Absolutely, I'm asking you.
So I think you need to look at the greater context around this. Why wasn't there an official government email used? Why is there a personal email used? Well, it's easy, because it's not subject to open records. You can shield your involvement there.
There's a legal question.
That is absolutely true.
Hang on, hang on,
That's not law in the state of Georgia.
Mr. Tarver, understood, we're talking over each other, and I am going to give Mr. Tarver an opportunity to respond. So I just want to make sure we're not talking over each other. Okay, so, Mr. Cusack, I'm going to give you 3 minutes
That's fine.
to address
real quick.
Commissioner Watts's question, and then Mr. Tarver, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to address Commissioner Watts's question, okay?
And then
Go ahead, Mr. Cusack.
you have the renderings as well, which were paid for by the mayor's office, end up on a billboard. And then you have a video that I showed you as well, where it's, I don't know anybody involved. I don't know who's doing this. So, what does that tell you? Like, that's not true. Not true at all. He knew who was involved. In fact, he's on the email chain approving it. So, there was something where this is getting covered up, where this is, I don't want to be involved, or I can't be outward facing on this. So look at it in that context, and then there's a lot of questions you have down the line. So it's not just the singular email you're looking at everything that's cumulatively happening, that circumstantially is pointing to this as well. So it's not just an email, I've given you a greater context of this as well. So I think to ignore that is doing a great disservice. So I think you have to take those things into your decision.
Remind me really quickly, the billboards you said were paid for by the mayor's office?
The rendering on one of the billboards.
Oh, understood. Okay.
Mr. Tarver, I'm going to give you a minute to respond to Commissioner Watts' question, or to anything Mr. Cusack has just said.
The rendering on the billboard, the rendering in the Augusta Chronicle article, the rendering in every media story that was printed regarding the James Brown Arena was paid for by the city of Augusta and made available to anyone who inquired about the proposed new James Brown Arena. So again, this rendering was not created just for use on a billboard. There has been no showing of a relationship between Mayor Davis and Cardinal Management, other than the fact that the email, the one email where he said, let's go with this version. There's been no business relationship, no political relationship, no showing by Mr. Kuzak back in the commission at all. And the interview, I mean, if the basis for this commission interview today is whether or not Mayor Davis gave a misleading response during the interview, maybe he did, but that is not evidence that he was involved in some type of unregistered, and I do think the term that Mr. Kuzak has used and that has been printed over and over again in the local media, that he was part of some dark money campaign and an unregistered ballot committee. And to suggest that Ms. Gibbons and Mayor Davis were involved in a dark money campaign when we know that Cardinal Management, the owner of the Regency Mall property, paid for those billboards as part of their business activity trying to develop or sell or lease that property, just seems to be unconscionable. So I would say that there has been insufficient. There are a lot of red herrings out there about what Mayor Davis may have said, the way Mayor Davis may have answered a question as part of an interview, where those renderings, who paid for the renderings that were circulated to others. He is no more responsible for being a part of an unregistered ballot committee or have engaged in a dark money campaign simply because he distributed those, or his office distributed those renderings to the media primarily, but to others in the community. And so I would argue that there's not been a sufficient showing of probable cause as it relates to kind of getting at the Mayor Hardy Davis Jr.
Thank you, Mr. Tarver. I'm prepared to make a motion. In the matter of concerned citizens of Richmond County, Hardy Davis Jr., Sonia Gibbons, and James McKinnon, case 2018-0051. I move that the commission find probable cause that respondents, concerned citizens of Richmond County, respondent Hardy Davis Jr., and respondent James McKinnon violated probable cause that there was a violation of OCGA 21-5-34A2 when they failed to register with the Augusta Richmond County Election Superintendent as a ballot committee prior to the acceptance of contributions and making expenditures, and/or violated OCGA 21-5-34A2 when they failed to make a campaign disclosure 15 days prior to the election and failed to disclose, when they failed to make a disclosure 15 days prior to the election.
Second.
The motion's been properly stated and seconded. Is there discussion amongst the commissioners? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Is there anything else with respect to this particular matter, Mr. Cusack?
No, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Tarver, anything with respect to this particular matter that has not already been covered?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I'm clear on who the commission found probable cause. Did they find probable cause as to Ms. Gibbons as well?
We did not, Mr. Tarver.
You did not.
Correct.
But when asked to Mayor Davis, you did.
Yes, we did.
And as I understand it, concerned citizens of Richmond County is or is not a respondent in this case.
The concerned citizens of Richmond County is a respondent. And let me just reiterate, probable cause was found with respect to the concerned citizens of Richmond County, Mayor Hardy Davis Jr. and Mr. James McKinnon, that they violated OCGA 21-5-34A2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tarver. All right, this matter is concluded. We'll move on to,
Mr. Chairman, may I drop off at this point?
you may, Mr. Tarver, unless you want to just hang around and listen to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And Mayor Davis and Ms. Gibbons and Ms. Red, thank you for your time as well. We will move to matter 21-0043-C in the matter of Quentin Howell. Mr. Cusack, this is yours.
It is, Mr. Chair.
All right, go ahead.
Is anybody from Mr. Howell here?
Oh, Mr. Howell?
All right, hello, Mr. Howell.
How y'all doing?
Hello, well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Commissioners, can I have 5 minutes to talk to him? I haven't been able to discuss the case with him prior to this.
Is that all right with you, Mr. Howell?
Sure, yeah, no problem, sir.
Okay, great.
You can have 10 if you want.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we split the difference? Why don't we take a 7-minute recess?
Yes, sir.
We'll allow Mr. Cusack and Mr. Howell to.
Well, can I get one more?
Sure. Absolutely. All right, we'll come back in 7 minutes.
Joe.
Quick recess.
Recess.
consent agreement in this matter.
All right.
And I can give you the rough outline of what it is and then get you a signed copy after I type it up and get it to them.
All right, so we're gonna go back on the record, and then you can walk us through the consent agreement.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Howell, you'll have an opportunity to inform the commission, your position as to the consent agreement, okay? Or do you have an attorney present?
Yes, sir, this
Ma'am?
man, young lady up front.
Okay, I'm sorry, your name, ma'am?
Good morning. Hogan Harrison Walton, first name is spelled Hoganne. Last name is hyphenated, it's Harrison hyphen
Harris.
O-N
Oh, okay, Harrison,
hyphen Walton, Walton.
okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll reconvene, and I'll call the matter of Quentin Howell, matter number 21, or case number 21-0043-C. Mr. Cusack?
Yes, Commissioners, we have reached a consent order in this matter. Mr. Howell ran a campaign for, I believe, in the State House during the 2020 election cycle. It was a solely self-funded campaign, and he missed filing some reports, some campaign contribution disclosure reports, and that was the allegations in this matter. So he's agreed to pay a $1,000 fine for not filing those reports, and that should be in proportion to the amount that he raised. It was a solely self-funded campaign, so we have come to that agreement.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cusack. And Ms. Harrison Walton, you are here on behalf of Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Harrison Walton, your thoughts on the proposed consent order?
We are in agreement to the proposed consent order. There are just some other issues that we wanted also to make sure they appear in the consent agreement as well.
Could you step to the mic?
Oh, pardon me.
Ms. Harrison Walton, thank you.
There were some other issues that were brought out in the complaint that we want to make sure they were addressed in the consent order. And I think this is also by agreement. There were some issues that are outside the purview of the Campaign Finance Committee's jurisdiction, such as a Medicaid fraud, a tax lien, owing taxes. And so the consent agreement will address those issues that they are outside the jurisdiction of this committee, just so that the person who made the complaint, if they come back and read it, they can see that those issues weren't looked over, but they were actually addressed and were found to be not within the jurisdiction of the committee, so that the complainant understands that it was addressed. Also, the consent agreement will state that Mr. Howell will not have to file his accounting for this year, 2022, or for 2021, because the account is still open, and we've agreed that he will not have to file any accounting reports for this year or for 2021, and that the account will be closed out in those 90 days. He'll close out the account, send in $1,000, and then that way, if he decides to run in the future, the account will be at zero.
And just to address that, Commissioners, it's on our old system, so it's locked, so I'm going to be the one that goes in and closes out the account.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the terms of the consent agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison Walton. Mr. Cusack, you in agreement?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then we'll wait for that consent order to come across it, and I don't believe there's anything administratively, procedurally we need to do, correct?
If you want to accept it pending the signature, that may be, just so we don't have to bring it up in the next meeting.
All right, then, so then I will, I move that with respect to case number 21-0043C in the matter of Quentin Howell, that we accept the consent order as outlined and agreed to by Mr. Cusack on behalf of the commission and Ms. Harrison Walton on behalf of Mr. Howell.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
We need to, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Is there, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Harrison Walton. Thank you, Mr. Cusack.
Thank you. May we be excused?
Yes, absolutely.
I appreciate y'all too.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Safe travels.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so let's move on to other consent orders. Do we need to run through these
I think we need to present them individually.
individually? All right. And Ms. Cusack, you've got all these, correct?
Yes, I do.
All right,
Seen a
so,
lot of you today.
okay, right, that's fine. And certainly, you know, I have no opposition to brevity, Mr. Cusack.
Okay.
Give,
Seconded.
give us what we need. We'll call the first in the matter of William Burton Jones, case 21-0021-C. Mr. Cusack.
Yes, Commissioners, this was a third-party complaint that came in alleging that Mr. Jones had accepted a contribution prior to filing his DOI. What happened, there was a tweet that went out for some campaign footage that showed before he had filed his DOI to run for lieutenant governor, that he had done some filming. And the campaign averts that it was for his state senate campaign. But they ended up using that footage for the rollout for the lieutenant governor campaign. The DOI for the lieutenant governor campaign was filed on August 6th of 2021, and then this tweet went out in July of 2021. It was thanking people for coming and filming. So it's the one single violation for accepting a contribution before the DOI was filed. I've seen there's the campaign's agreed to pay a $1,000 fine and pay $8,000 back to the state senate campaign. I received a breakdown of what was actually filmed before, or there was some editing done after the DOI was filed, and there was filming done before the DOI was filed, and the breakdown was that $8,000 of that had been done prior to the DOI being filed, and the editing had been done after the DOI had filed. So that's why they're paying back $8,000 in this matter. So they're paying a $1,000 fine, that's already been paid, because that is the max they can be fined for the single violation. So I would ask the commissioners accept this consent order.
Commissioners, any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Why is the $8,000?
That was,
How much was the total video?
I believe, 17,000? 17 or 18,000?
Okay, so would that, and the Senate paid for it?
Yes, well, so there is some where the second half was paid for by the lieutenant governor campaign. That was how the invoice broke down.
So the Senate didn't pay for more than $8,000?
Correct.
They didn't pay $17,000 and reported as such?
It's weird how it was, but it was broken down that the $8,000 was paid for by the Senate campaign and the other half was paid for by the lieutenant governor campaign.
So the Senate campaign report does not show $17,000?
It does, but it's a scrivener's error on that. We're gonna have to probably fix that, but that's how it was broken down in the invoice.
I'm confused. So the report is not right?
Correct.
So they're gonna have to amend their report?
Correct.
So your invoice, you have an invoice that only shows the Senate paid $8,000?
Yes,
Okay, and then they're refunding that $8,000?
and they're refunding that, yes.
And they're gonna amend the Senate?
Yes.
But the consent order doesn't say that?
No, it doesn't say that, but there was some haggling over the language here, so this is the final product as a result of that haggling.
Wait.
Let's get some clarity around that.
Yeah.
Clarifying Commissioner Thompson's point, the consent order states they have to pay the $8,000 back. It just doesn't mention amending the Senate campaign CCDR.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cusack. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. I didn't know we had.
No, that's all right.
Tell us your name, sir.
That's all right. Kerry Miller here on behalf of the complainant, Mr. Laird.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Just briefly, I think the questions kind of got to my question, which is the current Jones Senate campaign discloses a $17,000 expenditure for the purpose of filming in TV, and it's dated November 12, 2021. Presumably, that's when the check was written. But I'm struggling to understand where the 8,000 comes from, which is perhaps what some additional information could provide. But as it stands right now, the Jones Senate campaign has maxed out to the Jones LG campaign for both the primary and general election. So ergo, whatever this 17,000 was spent on would then essentially convert into an in-kind contribution to the Senate campaign, which would exceed limits. So that my questions and clarity would be resolved by this issue or in the alternative, so long as the consent order simply states that this commission's not putting a stamp of, approval on what could be a excess of contribution, that could also resolve the issue. Truthfully, it's something that I've yet to see the consent order, so I'm not entirely sure what exactly those details are, and I'm sure Mr. Cusack has the additional information.
Go ahead, Mr. Cusack.
Well, we're certainly not putting a rubber stamp on the exceeding contributions, but I think it's different when it's going to be a reimbursement for what this was paid.
The way I understood Mr. Miller was that the Senate campaign is already maxed out.
Correct.
So if the bill was $17,000 and they split it, then they each benefit the other part of it, no?
Can you explain that again? Sorry, I was trying to.
Yeah, so I mean, and we've had this conversation in the past, I think. Like, if you have a slate of candidates who join in a joint fundraiser and everybody pays a portion of it, let's say there's two, and they each pay half, does candidate A, who pays their half, is that an in-kind contribution to candidate B, who's there too, and reciprocal? Because you're getting the whole value of it. And I don't think we've ever clarified that before. Or is just that, do you see what I'm saying?
Kind of.
Secretary Mike?
I'll try and answer the question, but step back for a second.
Sure.
How we got this figure, I understand Mr. Miller's question too. And I've communicated with just now the Jones legal team. They did not want to amend the CCDR until the consent order was signed. They plan to do that immediately. But the CCDR was incorrect. The Senate didn't cut a check for 17 grand.
Right.
It cut a check for 8 grand, which is what has to be paid back so that it doesn't exceed contribution limits, because as Mr. Miller pointed out, they've already maxed out. Now, the other 9,000 was paid for by the LG campaign. So, I mean, they're allowed to pay for whatever cost of editing that came after DOI. I think you're getting to a question.
I got it. That clarifies
Yeah.
it. So the LG campaign is gonna have to go back and amend their disclosure too, because now they're gonna have to pay the entire, they're gonna have to show that 8,000. I guess they would have to amend it. It would be on their next disclosure.
To whatever degree it hasn't already been properly disclosed, it would need to be amended.
Well,
Or could be disclosed depending on the timing of it.
Let me see if I can do something real quick. So, Mr. Miller, you said you've not had an opposition to read the consent order, is that correct?
That's correct. I have not read the
Well, I want to make sure procedurally where we are. Mr. Miller, are you rising in opposition to the consent order?
Limited opposition is what I would term it, Mr. Chairman, which is simply that this discussion we're having here to understand where the number was arrived from. From what I understand, this is at least providing that explanation, but that led into, which was my second question of, if the 17,000 has already been disclosed as being paid out of the Senate campaign, but in fact half of it came out of the LG campaign. In that instance, both reports need to be amended.
Correct.
And as long as this commission is not putting a stamp of, implicit or explicit approval on something that has not been amended yet, because frankly, I will be unable to understand how that all shakes out until I see an amended report. I'm not asking this commission to allow me to inspect the records of the Jones campaign.
And
That's y'all's
we weren't going
to. That's y'all's responsibility, but which will be made clear to the extent the law requires following an amendment is what I'm gathering here today.
Correct. And Ms. Paradise, as she's indicated, they reached out to Mr. Cusack for direction on how they need to amend various reports for both campaigns and make sure it's compliant with what occurred and therefore the order.
And for them, they did reach out and say they wanted to wait until the consent was accepted before we do everything. So it was just a matter of not doing it for nothing, I guess.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Cusack? Any question? Okay. Hearing none, I move that we approve the consent order as presented in the matter of William Burton Jones, case number 21-0021-C. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been properly made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it, the motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Cusack. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, are you here on any other matters?
No, sir.
Okay, then you can hang out with us. I just didn't want to skip over you like I almost did.
I'm gonna wrap up one final email, then I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Okay. And it's taped, so you can go back and look at it later. We'll move on to, in the matter of Keisha Waits, case number 21-0044-C. Also you, Mr. Cusack.
Yes, Commissioners, this is in the matter of Keisha Waits. Ms. Waits is a current council member of the Post 3 at-large Atlanta City Council seat, where she was elected during the 2021 municipal general election. In this matter, it was brought to our attention that there were various failure to files of campaign contribution disclosure reports, and that there were expenditures made by the campaign. So in this matter, she failed to timely file her September 30th, 2021 CCDR, or October 25th, 2021 CCDR, or November 24th runoff CCDR. She made it to a runoff in this election and won that runoff, and then failed to report contributions and failed to report expenditures. And I have to brag on Ms. Waits a little bit. She turned over all the documents within a week of us asking and was more than responsive in this matter. So she is paying a $5,000 fine for her infractions, and she is going to pay that to the commission within 45 days of this consent order being adopted. So she's been very, very cooperative, so I would ask the commission accept this consent order.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack. Commissioner Thompson.
Can you give us a breakdown? It says $5,000 in late fees and civil penalties. What's the breakdown? What of the 5,000 is late fees and what is civil penalty? Do you know?
So right now it would be about 3,000 in late fees, 2,000 in civil penalties. It's ultimately a breakdown we determine when we get back to the office and look at the consent order once it's accepted. So depending on how much we accept in late fees or how much we turn over to the state treasury.
Have you already had a discussion with Ms. Waits or her team about what the breakdown was going to be?
No, it was just this, we arrived at this number.
Well,
go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
I think in the future it'd be helpful so we're consistent to know what is late fees and what civil penalties. I mean, because just a broad number doesn't really make any sense to me. And I know the chairman has been very passionate in the past about knowing how we got there.
That's understood.
Right. Not the chairman of today's hearing. Anything else from Mr. Cusack? Is there anyone here on behalf of Ms. Waits that needs or wants to be heard? All right, then I move that we accept the consent order as presented in the matter of Keisha Waits, case number 21-0044-C. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been properly made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Calling next in the matter of Kirsten Dunn, case number 21-0040-C. Mr. Cusack?
Yes, Ms. Dunn ran for Atlanta mayor in the last election cycle. She filed her DOI on August 23rd of 2021. She filed, during her time as a candidate for mayor, she failed to timely file 3 CCDRs in this matter. Her campaign did not raise all that much money. I believe it was about $4,000 or $5,000 if I'm not mistaken, but she has agreed to pay $500 only in late fees in this matter to wrap up this case.
Okay.
But how do we get to that number?
These
There's 3 reports that are late, and from my understanding, it's $125 per report unless we send out a certified notice after that.
And I misspoke, the third one is a failure to file, the December 31st, 2021.
So that's a $1,000 violation.
But that's not a late fee. That's a
No,
violation.
he misspoke.
I misspoke, yeah, you can have it as a late fee, because it wasn't filed, so we've counted those, normally we've done $1,000 per report for late, but given how much was spent and taken in during the campaign, deviated down on this one.
So we're making up late fees.
No, it's 1 and 2 are failure to timely file, 3 is failure to file.
So one is a timeliness issue, one is a failure to respond at all issue.
Yes, she failed to file the last year.
And if I'm understanding.
Which, yeah, to Commissioner, sorry.
No, go ahead.
To Commissioner Thompson's point, these orders need to better distinguish, the total figure needs to distinguish what's late fees and what's civil penalty in the future.
That's right. We're going to do that.
All right. Anything else for Mr. Cusack on this matter? Is there anyone here on behalf of Ms. Dunn who wishes to be heard? All right, then I move in the matter of Kristen Dunn, case number 21-0040-C, that we approve the consent order as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is properly stated and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Calling next in the matter of Felicia Ann Moore, case number 21-0031-C. Mr. Cusack.
And this one is in the matter of Felicia Moore. This was a third-party complaint that came into the commission alleging Ms. Moore had failed to timely file her personal financial disclosure statement and then failed to disclose an ownership in a tract of property that I believe was out of state that her mother lives at. This case is resolved by a $200 civil penalty and late fee. It is laid out expressly. I learned as I went along, I guess, but
I'll note for the record that the respondent is going to pay $125 to the commission in late fees and $75 in civil penalty.
yes, and it's a low civil penalty because the property in question was relayed back to her. It was in her mother's name. It was relayed to her for keeping up with it, but her mother still lived there.
It was in a trust.
Yes.
In the mother's name,
Yes.
too.
So technically, she had to disclose it, but it was also, she has nothing to do with the property other than it's in her name, and it's her mother living there and reverts to her when she untimely passes. So it wasn't the worst violation of the world.
Anything else on that, Mr. Cusack?
That would be it. I just ask you to accept this consent order.
Thank you. Is there anyone here on behalf of Ms. Moore to speak to this proposed consent order? Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cusack? Hearing none, I move that in the matter of Felicia Moore, case number 21-0031-C, that we accept the consent order as negotiated and presented.
Second.
The motion has been properly made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Calling next on the calendar in the matter of Dietrich Leggett, case number 2019-0062.
This is going to be the same issue.
Okay. Mr. Cusack, are you taking this one as well?
Yes, this was Mr. Baywall's, but I helped him out with this one. And
Okay.
it's gonna have the same issue, but I can explain it a little better on this one. But Mr. Leggett, I don't know if you remember, he was here via Zoom last time and asked if he could discuss with the commission staff to resolve this case, and did right away.
Okay.
So he is an alderman in the city of Savannah, and what these should read in that his original campaign, there was a third-party complaint filed that he did not file any CCDRs. Once that complaint was filed and sent to him, he then rushed up to the elections office and filed all of them at once. So they should be failure to files. But he was very cooperative and agreed to pay a $1,500, what should be late fees and civil penalties. It should just be, we could take it as a late fee, we could take it as a civil penalty. It depends on which we want to do. But because it should be a failure to file. So that's what he's agreed to pay, and he is paying that off monthly, on monthly installments.
Secretary Amati?
Now, I'm going to go ahead and address Commissioner Thompson's point. It's listed as late fee violations, which are capped at $125 each. I think for the $1,500 to be appropriate, it would have to also found as a conclusion that he failed to file, which was the allegation, which was correct. So I don't get a vote on this, but I don't know if you want to continue it. And
Can we change, since this has the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Has the respondent signed, the copy I have has not been signed.
That would be for Mr. Mayweal. It was my understanding, I can reach out to Mr. Leggett and see if I can give him the back page and amend that to say late fees and civil penalties.
So here's what I'm going to do, Mr. Cusack, and if it's all right with commissioners, I'm going to continue this one to the next hearing and ask that you amend or have Mr. Baywall amend the consent order, get it signed by Mr. Leggett. And so when we come back at our next regularly scheduled meeting, we can just put this one on and a signed copy would be great if we did.
Yes, yes.
Great, thank you.
Or you can just leave it like this, and we can beat up on Mr. Baywall.
And I have to take,
We could do that.
it was bad advice on my part.
Right, and so
I have to take responsibility.
we're going to spare Mr. Baywall when he comes to his first commission meeting. All right, so that matter is continued. Let's move to the next matter, in the matter of Dr. Israel Prince Barsh, case number 21-0021-C. Mr. Cusack, you also taking this one on behalf of Mr. Baywall?
Yes, Mr. Barsh was a candidate for the 4-year term on the Grange City Council. He failed to timely file 2 CCDRs in this matter. This was a third-party complaint that was actually filed by his opponent because his opponent had no idea how much money he was spending or raising. So he was trying to figure that out, and so that's how this got to us, because I did not know LaGrange had a city council until this complaint. So
It's 2 of us.
yeah. He's agreed to pay $250 in late fees. His campaign, I think, raised a total of $500 or $600 total. So it was a very minuscule campaign, very small campaign. Ultimately, he was not a successful candidate in his election.
I see this one's already been signed by Mr. Barsh.
Yes,
And so on behalf of the commission, you're presenting it, so we're going to sign it, correct?
correct.
All right, anyone here on behalf of Dr. Barsh? All right, commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cusack? All right, I move that we accept the proposed consent order in the matter of Dr. Israel Prince Barsh, case number 21-0024-C. Motion been properly made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Cusack. All right, so since we had a quick break, we've got administrative dismissals, which I assume we can just run through these. There's no actual action for us to take.
We don't have to.
The commission just wants to adopt them.
Okay.
Not even adopt them.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Does anyone have any questions on the matters proposed under agenda topic number 5 on the administrative dismissals? Any questions to either Mr. Lane or Mr. Cusack or to Secretary Amani? All right, hearing no questions, those administrative dismissals are adopted. Thank you, Mr. Cusack, Mr. Lane, and Secretary Amani. All right, let's move to our next agenda item, the report of our Executive Secretary. Mr. Amani, the floor is yours.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple points here. I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to start with the budget update. That'll be a little quicker. Last week, Governor Kemp signed House Bill 910. which is the amended fiscal year budget in the law. The original budget, which was passed last July, which we put a good bit of work into, resulted in the agency or the commission receiving a 38% increase in funding, pushing our annual budget up to $2.98 million. That increase allotted for, amongst other things, increase in staffing in legal, education, and administrative division. We've discussed that all in the past. The amended budget provides for another increase of an additional $193,000 in change, resulting in an overall final FY 2022 budget of $3,173,000. $3,173,982. This increase came for two separate line items. First, about 120 of it came at the direction of the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, which proposed a $5,000 cost of living increase for all state employees in the state. That will be distributed, my understanding is, in a one-time check of $3,750 to all state employees, and then the remaining $1,250 will be aggregated through the final quarter of the fiscal year. This is a result of two issues. One, it's the first cost of living increase that state employees have received in 14 years, so it's been a while. The other is between the length of time since the last COLA and the increase in cost for pretty much everything. More than usual, government agencies have struggled to remain remotely competitive with the private sector. I can tell you in the legal division alone, in the past year, it's been much more difficult to hire even entry-level attorneys at the same rate. So I hope that this will increase our ability to be competitive and keep bringing on good talent at the staff level. The other remaining $72,000 in change was an increase in the amended budget to deal with higher than normal legal fees that we were experiencing at OSA, beyond what we've seen in a number of past years. This is a one-time insert to cover the first half of the year and what we anticipate through the rest of the fiscal year. As far as the big budget for FY 2023, House Bill 911, we're working with the legislature on that. We've had hearings and that bill is passed out of the House with similar increases, but it either sits in the Senate or it's going to Conference Committee, but we'll report back hopefully good results on the budget come June. Also want to talk about Senate Bill 120, which is a piece of legislation that I know Mr. Thompson is very proud of the agency for passing.
It's a piece of what?
It's legislation, yeah.
Different word.
Yeah. So regardless of what Commissioner Thompson wants you to believe, this is actually a really good bill we've been working on for 2 years now. We passed it originally out of the House as House Bill 333 last year. It got mucked up in some Senate drama. On sine die, what we did is we took a Senate bill, this bill, that was sitting in the House. We gutted it, we put our bill into it, and we tried to move it over to the Senate on sine die. Parliamentary rules in the Senate are frankly very odd, and I don't understand half of them. So we thought we had an opportunity to pass it last year on sine die by moving it back over as a substitute. We didn't do that, but the Senate agreed to remove all of their amendments to the bill this year, gave it a clean up and down vote, and passed out of the Senate and was signed by the governor into law.
And just for clarification of the record, could you just give us a high-level summary of the bill?
I'll do it.
Awesome, thank you.
So,
Can you do that?
I think I've got it. And I'll start by stressing it's not a perfect bill. It's not everything we sought to get, but it's a good bill. Took a lot of work with the chairman of the Senate and the House Judiciary, buy-in from the Rules Chairman of the Senate in particular, who really championed it along the way at the end. And I think it resulted in a good landing spot. We've added some definitions without commenting on the persuasibility of the argument. The issue of loans has come up in the past, being undefined. We've added the definition of loan. We have made a distinction in what is a public officer between constitutional partisan offices and other statewide offices, because in the past, arguably, and we've never enforced this position because it's unreasonable, but arguably, certain constitutional officers would fall on multiple different filing tracks because of the lack of distinction. So we've made that distinction. We've added a definition for staff attorney, which will come up here in a second. Moving forward, we've clarified, as the Commission's always held, staff attorneys are included in the class of people who can file a complaint as a person. So we've inserted including a staff attorney into that subsection that deals with complaints being filed. Hopefully that, and frankly, we've wasted a lot of times in a lot of cases hearing the same argument over and over again. Hopefully this dispels that issue moving forward. We've run into a lot of issues with statute of limitations questions in different areas of the law. What we've done in a couple different sections, we've created clarity. So for any 2-year office, whether it's an omission or a violation, a conversion, a failure, for any type of violation, a 2-year office results in a 3-year statute of limitation for that issue. A 4-year office results in a 5-year statute of limitation for that issue. I know we've talked in the past, for example, the Balfour case where it was a failure to file, the code was silent, and so the legal interpretation was there was only a 1-year statute of limitation. We have cornered off all those cracks. We've also changed the length of time a campaign has to retain the records to be consistent with the statute of limitations. In the past, you could, if you were a 2-year office holder, you had to maintain records for 3 years. But if you were a 4-year statewide office holder or even a 6-year office holder, you only had to maintain records for 3 years. It didn't make a lot of sense. So we have lengthened that so that records retention by campaigns are consistent with the statute of limitations. We've clarified further what cannot be done with campaign funds, which includes transferring or loaning or investing or donating to oneself or their family members as defined by the code already. To prohibit transferring, donating, etc., loaning, investing money into a business in which you have the ownership interest of or are on the payroll of, as well as donating it or sending it to your own trust that your trust or nonprofit are on the payroll of. Basically, things that would be improper personal conversion, but because there were some back doors, we had seen people do that in the past and turn around and write themselves a check for whatever they transferred out and couldn't do anything about that. We've changed how maximum contribution limits will be raised and lowered. Moving forward, it will be raised and lowered the same way we do now, but at the end of every gubernatorial cycle. This is based on an attorney general opinion we got that said we had to raise or lower them after every single election, which would include special elections, which would have resulted at times in people in the same office having different contribution limits because this office had it raised following a special and that one didn't have an election for a number of years. So we're just creating consistency and clarity following that AG opinion. It'll be raised or lowered at the end of every gubernatorial cycle, and we won't be in a position where some people have different limits and rules than others. We've clarified what one can do with money raised for a future election that you do not qualify or appear on the ballot for. This came up back in the Oxendine matter when he filed a CUSA bundled for 4 different elections and then didn't make it past the first one because of some inconsistency or lack of clarity in how the code was written. We've effectively changed the law to require if you don't appear on the ballot for that next election, you have to give that money back. You can't raise for a primary runoff, a general, and a general runoff, lose the primary and keep all the rest of the money. Has to go back to the donor, and if for whatever reason you can't locate the donor, it has to be donated to a charity as already prescribed by law. An interesting issue that will affect y'all, but primarily was done at the request and accommodation of every single judge or justice in the state. If you file a personal financial disclosure form, moving forward, you will not also have to file an affidavit. And this is a particular issue because 99% of judges, by way of being elected, served on a council, the Superior Court Council, even though they didn't actually attend the council meetings, they didn't pass rules that impacted how the councils operated. Just by being elected, they were required to file this affidavit. The financial disclosure form, in my opinion, already addresses any dealings you have with state dollars. The judges in particular also already filed a Supreme Court 3.15 certificate dealing with some of the same things. So we just said, look, if you already filed the PFDS, you don't have to also file the affidavit that year. Local challengers to office, because of the scrivener's error by Lake Council in 2014, if you're running for statewide or state office, you have to file a personal financial disclosure report upon qualifying. Your opponents also have to file a financial disclosure report upon qualifying. But at the local level, only the incumbents upon qualifying had to file a financial disclosure report. Their opponents didn't have to file anything, and it was understandably something that really ticked off a lot of local elected officials. So we have fixed the scrivener's error. And local challengers and incumbents will now both have to file a financial disclosure report.
How did the local entities know about this?
A lot of them didn't. A lot of them,
They still don't.
I've reached out to GMA and ACCG to let all of their
Okay.
entities know. I think those are the high level points. I have something here about soil and water district supervisors not having to file a PFDS, and I mean, I don't even know what that is at this point, but it was some absurd reading that they're not actually elected, but still have to file a financial disclosure report, which didn't really make sense to me, so we had that removed. Finally, we have some staff additions. I want to introduce and welcome LaTanya Corbin, who's in the back of the courtroom.
Did Senate Bill 120 have something to do with the 5-year look-back period?
That's right, Commissioner Thompson, thank you.
You just gonna skip over that part?
It was buried in the notes. I have it right here.
Okay.
There was a change in the financial disclosure look-back portions for all statewide partisan offices. In the past, that look-back period's been a year in the first quarter. That was changed the previous 5 years in the first quarter and requires some statement of income where that money came from.
Which the first quarter is not over yet, so.
Right.
We're telling people running for statewide just to guess?
Well,
The first quarter?
that part was already the
I don't
case.
think it's
It
ever-
was.
Well, but we're still telling people to guess.
My guess is Commissioner Thompson has had an opportunity to raise his concerns with the legislature.
I said it was a good bill, not a perfect bill.
And the bill has passed. So given that this is the Executive Secretary's report.
I got you. All right.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, the law previously required the prior year and the first quarter of that election year. Now it's 5 in the first quarter. Commissioner Thompson's point is a fair one, but that first quarter issue that you're alluding to hasn't changed. I said it was a good bill, not a perfect bill. I don't write the law. I just try and get input.
Commissioner Watts wants to weigh in.
For the record, this has been the most entertaining executive secretary report to date since I've been on the commission.
He's sticking around another year just because of this. So I want to introduce LaTanya Corbin, who's a new paralegal with us. She's got a long and distinguished career in public service. She comes to us as a legal assistant and a victim advocate from a local DA's office. We're really excited to have her on board.
Welcome, Ms. Corbin.
And we have a new staff attorney, Tim Mayweal, who had a couple cases, but as I indicated, he had a medical emergency, couldn't be here today. But he's been here a month and a half and has already hit the ground running. We're really happy to have him on board. Think he's going to help improve the agency. And we have a posting that just closed for an additional entry-level attorney. So we look to try and do some interviews there, hopefully with the higher salaries we can now offer after this COLA from the governor's office. We can get some good talent. This position is the one that Ms. Pearl has held that, frankly, we've posted once or twice, and there was just not a lot of, we held it open as opposed to hiring. So that says, I think, enough. But that is, we will have another attorney coming on hopefully before the next commission meeting, and we look forward to bringing someone good on to work with all y'all.
Thank you, Secretary Motti. Is there any opposition to acceptance of the Secretary's report? Hearing no opposition, thank you. Commissioner Thompson. We'll move on to the next item, the report of the Attorney General. Assistant Attorney General Young.
Hi there. I've got a number of things to report on. We've been busy in the Office of State Administrative Hearings. We've had 2 matters go to final hearings since our last commission meeting. We have a full evidentiary hearing in the School Reform 2016 case, which involved an unregistered independent committee that was an advocate against the election of some school board representatives in Muskogee County. We conducted about a day-long hearing. In that, we have not yet received a ruling, but should have one before our next meeting. We also had a final hearing in the Angela Mayfield matter, which was a basically failure to file CCDRs and personal financial disclosures case. Ms. Mayfield did not show and appear at the hearing, but we presented our evidence to the ALJ. And again, we hope that we will have a final order on that one, along with what I understand are probably hefty bills coming on both of those cases before our next meeting. We have set a hearing for May 12th in the Oxendine matter. However, Mr. Oxendine has filed a petition for judicial review with the Superior Court of Fulton County. We'll be filing a response to that. He's also moved that court to stay our proceedings until the petition is ruled on. However, we're hoping to get a ruling from the court, both substantively on the petition itself and on the motion in advance of the hearing, so that that hearing date can remain on the calendar. We just received an order from the Gwinnett Superior Court in our subpoena action involving New Georgia Project. This is the action seeking to recover bank records from the organization. They have filed a motion to alter or amend the judgment following the dismissal of their appeal. The judge has denied that motion, which is the final obstacle, and we are expecting hopefully this week to obtain those subpoenaed bank records. In the companion action that's in Fulton County seeking to subpoena communications documents, that appeal has been fully briefed in the Georgia Court of Appeals, and we may have a decision on that by the time of our next meeting, or if not, probably the meeting after that. In the Purdue versus Kemp litigation, the Northern District of Georgia entered a preliminary order enjoining the applicability of OCGA 215-34.2 and finding that Georgians First, which is Governor Kemp's leadership committee, could not continue to raise and expend funds during the primary season against his opponent, David Perdue. That order did not award any relief against the commission or any of the other state defendants, and we have filed on behalf of the commission a motion to dismiss on that basis, basically saying that because the commission's sole involvement in this case has been to accept the registration, that did not create any injury, and therefore there's no Article 3 standing and no basis for imposition of liability on behalf of the commission. That's been filed in the Northern District of Georgia and is awaiting a ruling. The underlying injunction has also been appealed by Georgians First, so we will also be a party to that appeal, and we'll re-raise the same kind of Article 3 standing and non-liability on behalf of the commission types of arguments in the 11th Circuit as well. That's it for now. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Young. Any questions for Ms. Young amongst the commission? And is there any opposition to the acceptance of the Attorney General's report as presented? All right, hearing none, thank you, Ms. Young. I don't see anyone in the audience, but is there any public comment that we need to address or receive? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
The motion has been simultaneously moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.